Welcome to As I Live and Grieve, a podcast that tells the truth about how hard this is. We're glad you joined us today. We know how hard it is to lose someone you love and how well-intentioned friends and family try so hard to comfort us. We created this podcast to provide you with comfort, knowledge, and support. We are grief advocates, not professionals, not licensed therapists. We are you.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back again to another episode of As I Live and Grieve. Thanks so much, everyone. Last time I said y'all. I tried hard not to do that this time. But thanks, everyone, for tuning in. Whether you tune in every week or just hop around the different episodes, doesn't matter to me. What matters to me is that you've taken the time out of your day, out of your schedule, to give a listen, and I appreciate that today. Got a really neat guest today. We've already decided we're probably best friends, even though we just met moments ago. With me today is Christina Napoleon. Thanks, Christina, for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's such an honor to be here with you tonight.
Oh, thanks. It's our honor. And also with me is my sidekick, Kelly. Hey, y'all. Oh, so she did the y'all, but she really does live down south. She lives in Texas. I'm still a Yankee. Okay, Christina, to get us started, could you just share with our listeners a little bit about your background? Who is Christina?
Thank you for asking. So my background is very interesting. I have 25 plus years in finance, but then when I lost my husband to cancer and my daughter was only 6 years old, I came from a world of finance where I went into the office in the morning. My assistant gave me a checklist and I knew exactly what I needed to check off before I could leave for the day. But the night that my husband passed away, nobody gave me a checklist. Nobody told me what I needed to do, the very first steps as I entered widowhood and as I entered solo mamahood. So I decided to make it a mission to learn as much as I could about grief. And I left the corporate world and left the finance world and entered the world of healing. And I immersed myself in 3 years of grief education training, grief coaching, and I now have a private Facebook group for widows, and I do widow grief relief coaching. I wrote a book. The book, The Positive Widow, is found on Amazon. That is where I found my healing. I was at a place in my life where I was at the beach because I live in Florida, and this was after I lost my husband. I then lost my mother, and then I lost my father. And all of a sudden, I lost my identity.
Yes.
I was no longer a wife, and now I was no longer a daughter.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know who I was. And I can remember the exact morning where I dropped my daughter off, and I drove right to the beach, and I just wanted to give up. The world was so dark. I would drop her off at school, and I would go back home, and I would put the comforters over my head, close the curtains, and then I would just hold his picture in my hands, spray it with his favorite cologne, wear his favorite white Hanes t-shirt. And I did not know how to get out of bed. That morning when I went to the beach, I wanted to give up. And I'm getting emotional, sorry.
That's okay. We'll cry right along with you. Don't worry about a thing.
I kept walking and watching those waves crash against the shoreline. And I kept thinking, wow, those waves are just like the grief waves. That morning, I couldn't even pinpoint what it was that made me feel so griefy that I had to drive to the beach. I needed to catch my breath, get some fresh air. But I realized in that moment that I no longer wanted to stay at the bottom of that darkest ocean floor. I made a decision right then and there that I wanted to learn how to swim through those grief waves and find the light again in my life. Because if you think about it, my daughter didn't just lose her daddy to cancer.
That's right.
She lost me.
That's
that
right.
Fun, loving, carefree mama who would take her to ballet class and go out to McDonald's. And
Yep.
I was crippled with anxiety that I couldn't even get in the car and take her to McDonald's, take her to ballet classes. I just wanted to stay in bed and hide in the darkness and shut the world off. But that morning, I made the decision she needed her mommy. And I, too, wanted to find hope again. I wanted to find healing. I wanted to find light. And that's when I decided I was going to immerse myself in everything I could grab my hands on regarding grief. And then I didn't know I was going to immerse myself for 3 years in grief education. And I decided to become a grief coach and started my own Facebook group. I have over 10,000 followers and members, and it's just been beautiful. But the biggest healing was when I wrote my book. And it took me a long time to write The Positive Widow. And it came from my heart, and I share some of my own stories. So widows don't feel like what they're going through, they're doing it all by themselves and they're going crazy. Mm-hmm. But I also share the healing tools that I developed and created, and reflection questions and self-care and grief education, all within my book. And when I wrote my book, I understood widow's fog, how it just holds you back from making simple decisions. So I knew that if I wrote this book, the chances of anyone reading it from the front to back would be very slim because of widow's fog.
That's right.
Yep. So I made sure that there's a table of contents, and I call it a widow's wisdom box. They can pull out what they need from the widow's wisdom box. Maybe they're suffering with anxiety that day. Like, oh, wait, Christina wrote about that. Or maybe they're having panic attacks. Christina wrote about that. Or maybe, you know what, Christina said something about grief and gratitude and how she did not know how to find it for a long time. And I just don't feel any grief and gratitude in my heart today. Mm-hmm. How did she start to find it? They can pull that out of the widow's wisdom box and go right to the table of contents.
Wow. So much of what you've said, I'm trying to tuck it into different corners of my brain and my mind, because I have ordered a copy of your book. I'm waiting for it to get to my doorstep, but I can't wait now to go through the pages. I know, first of all, I have to tell you, I love the word grief. First time I've heard it, but I love it. I'm going to be using it now, and I will credit you for that.
Thank you. I see it all the time, and it probably started with my daughter.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, how many years has it been since you've lost your husband?
It's been 9 years.
9 years.
I lost Roger.
Okay. Yeah. I'm coming up on 7 years since my husband, Tom.
I'm so sorry for your loss.
Oh, thank you. Like you, I got to a point that I had to do something. Yes. And it's very interesting how it happens with different people at different times. I love that it was the waves mm-hmm. that helped you, because nature often plays a part in that. Yes. Whether it's the sounds of nature, the air that you're inhaling, or the log you might be sitting on, or the picnic table in the park, or whatever. But the other thing I kind of wanted to mention too is this whole widow's fog. I never thought much about it, even though I had heard the term before. I never thought much about it until I could not make a decision which M&M to eat first. And I thought, oh my gosh, here we are. This is uglier than I thought.
It is.
Yeah. Yep.
And nobody understands it unless they're in our shoes.
Exactly.
Because we were a we, and now we have to navigate life as a me.
Yeah.
So the person that I would always go to and ask for,
right,
what to do.
Right.
The person I needed to help me get through that grief, he was no longer here.
Right. And yours was double-sided, because you were no longer a wife, okay? But your daughter is looking to you and watching you. And she lost the mom that she knew.
Yes.
So once you realized that, of course, you were trying to reconstruct that and rebuild that bond and everything, and show her and reassure her that everything was okay. Now, you stood there in front of the waves, and you decided you wanted to swim. You didn't want to give in. You didn't want to give up. Mm-mm. You wanted to swim. What did you do first?
Oh, this is a good question. I did not know what self-care was. I came from Chicago. I grew up my dad came from Lithuania. My mom came from Germany. They were already in their 20s when they came to America. And in Chicago, we have all these ethnic communities. So I didn't even speak English, even though I was born in Chicago, until I was 5 years old. I taught myself English through watching Sesame Street, when I was made fun of in kindergarten because I didn't know how to speak English. Mm-hmm. So my background is Eastern European, and I lost my brother when I was 9 years old, and no, we were not allowed to talk about it. We were not allowed to talk about him. We weren't allowed to bring up his name. We had to shut all of that down. Any emotion I felt, I had to bury it deep inside of myself.
Yep.
And so I was raised that hard work ethics is what makes you be a good person. And sharing feelings was a sign of weakness.
Right.
So when I made that decision on the beach, I had no idea what self-care was, even because to me that was selfish. I was a caregiver for almost 5 years for my husband. Then I was a caregiver for my father. So for a good 10 years, I was a caregiver. There was no way that I was going to carve out time to do a massage or going and go for a walk and just go for a walk without a purpose, just to go and breathe and talk to God and talk to my husband. That was so foreign to me. But on that beach, there was a beach yoga session happening that time.
Oh.
And I watched everybody there, and I stopped and I'm like, what are they doing? And it's not the traditional yoga. They were just stretching. Is really what it looked like. And I thought, okay, I needed to catch my breath. I was feeling so overwhelmed and I was scared. I was having a heart attack and I needed to calm down. I needed to breathe. So I didn't have a yoga mat with me, didn't have a towel, nothing, but I went furthest away from the group where I still hear the yoga instructor. And I just laid there and started doing the stretching exercises, including breathing exercises. And I could hear the waves crashing as I was doing it. And I just started to cry. I just started crying. And it was my very first emotional release. The very first time I was releasing all that grief that was sitting so deep inside my body. And so I thought, okay, I don't know what that was about, but I'm going to go back again tomorrow. And that's when I started to walk and I started to do the beach yoga. And also at the time when my husband passed, he passed away through hospice at home.
Okay.
So I was able to get bereavement counseling through hospice. And it was only a short time. They only allow you to have so many sessions.
Right.
But she kept asking me, well, what did you like to do before he passed away? And, and I didn't know. I was just a wreck. And then she said, well, what did you like to do before you met him, before you were married? And I'm like, well, I used to like to walk. And she's like, okay, let's talk about walking. Why don't you go and walk? She had not lost her spouse. And she didn't understand.
Right.
And I was like, well, I can't do that. Remember, I wanted to, every morning, wanted to just crawl under the bed and
sure
this picture. So I made a promise to her that I would start to walk. I failed that very first morning. I woke up and I laid my shoes out the night before. And you would think it would be so easy to just lean over and tie your shoelaces.
It's not.
It is not. I couldn't do it. It was horrible. So I made a deal with myself. I negotiated with myself. And I told myself, and I write about this in my book, The Power of One. If I get up tomorrow morning, all I have to do is walk for 1 minute, 1 minute. Then I can go back to bed and I can cry and hold his picture. And then I'll add 1 minute every morning. And it was the best gift I ever gave myself, because in those 1 minute every morning turned into 30 minutes 1 month later. And I started to see the sky was blue again. I started to smell the grass was cut. I could see the grass was green. And I started to feel alive again. So that's the first step I did, was I had to do inner healing within myself.
Right.
And then I started to look into resources. And that was becoming a certified grief educator and grief coach.
Yeah. Yeah. And that often happens, is people will decide, this was so painful, so devastating, so difficult. I have to help others because I made it this far. I have to help others. It's also very common to find that same perspective in addiction counseling. A lot of times your counselors for addictions and alcoholism are addicts and alcoholics themselves. It's the same thing. They found recovery. They know it's hard. very, very difficult. So they want to help others, and they want it to be, because they have the credibility and they can honestly say, I know how you feel, and they can mean it.
Yes.
They can mean
it. And that's why I was so passionate about wanting to become a certified grief coach. I was shopping grief counselors because remember, I only got so many sessions through hospice.
Right.
And then I felt lost again. And as I was shopping grief counselors through my health insurance, nobody was a widow. Nobody had ever experienced the loss of a spouse.
Yeah.
Some of them had never experienced any kind of loss.
Yeah.
Their knowledge was textbook training.
Right.
And I could not connect with them.
Right.
I felt like I was being just sit here and talk to me for 45 minutes and they were watching the clock. And I didn't feel like they really were giving me any tools to be able to take those baby steps to feel like I'm finally moving forward.
Right.
Nobody told me that I can move forward and with more love, more peace, start to find joy and hope. And I'm not leaving him behind, because that's what I struggled with. Every time a moment of joy would come up, I would push it down because that guilt would come up. How dare I start to feel joy if he's not here?
Right.
Feel that joy. And so none of my counselors, grief counselors, they didn't understand that. They never told me that I can have gratitude and grieve at the same time.
Right. They just couldn't put it all together in the right perspective for you. I understand that. I was talking with someone recently about that very issue, that if you decide that you want to reach out and get some professional help, it's important that you not just say, okay, I'm going to go to this person. You need to figure out, is there some chemistry there? Does this person make you feel comfortable? Do you feel that they can give you what you need? And it's almost like an interview. And then I made it a point to say that most of the grief educators, grief counselors, therapists, whatever their background, whatever their training is, whatever their certification is, most of them will offer that initial free consultation, phone call, virtual meeting, whatever, whether it's 10 minutes, 15 minutes, half an hour. I even know someone who does it for an hour. You'll get a free hour. Well, I know more than one someone's. Yeah, but that's rare. But in an hour's time, you should be able to know, well, let's face it, Christina, I met you tonight for the first time, and probably within 3 minutes, we just clicked.
Yes.
We just clicked. And yet I have met guests that, well, we just didn't really click. We still had a successful episode. But when you click with someone. So try to, if you're going to look for professional help, don't look for a person, look for several and talk to all of them, and then make your decision based on that.
And I see that 50% of your healing actually is due to connection.
Absolutely.
So having that connection is so important for you to even find any hope in healing.
Absolutely. And let's face it, you are going to be telling these people some of your most intimate thoughts, fears, beliefs. You want someone that's going to be accepting of that, non-judgmental, and someone who, number one, is actually going to listen and then
has the tools to share with you.
Yes, and also has a solid resource list.
Yes,
of different things that might help you. Yeah, absolutely.
Very. I like that you said that, the acceptance.
Yeah,
because that's what I do. I accept you where you are right now.
Absolutely.
And you need your grief to be witnessed.
Yeah. Kelly, do you want to pipe in?
I was just going to say that I agree on the person thing. Fortunately, with my therapist, we clicked instantly. And we're here 13 years later, still doing therapy once a week. But it's very, very important. I agree that you'd have to connect with that person, or you're not going to be honest with them or yourself, and you're just going to be wasting both of your time.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's such a good point. You are. If you don't feel comfortable with them, how are you going to open up and bare your soul? Because let's face it, grief is messy.
Oh, it is. It's ugly. It's ugly. It really is. Yeah. And now you mentioned that you've lost your husband. You've lost both parents. And that mirrors my losses too. I had one other that I added. Well, I didn't add it. It just happened. but I lost an infant son who was less than 24 hours old. And all of those losses were at different times in my life, and the grief was different with each loss. And in fact, the loss of my infant son, Lee, was number 2 in my list of 4 major losses. And it was so long ago that society's process, if you will, for dealing with grief is just pick yourself up, put your big girl panties on, and move on.
Yeah.
So for me, and that situation was unique in that when he was born, first he was stillborn, then they came back and said he was alive, and then they had to whisk him off to a different facility where they had a neonatal intensive care unit. That was time before smartphones.
Yeah.
I never saw him. I never held him. There was no picture taken of him. So once I got home, and then you add that generational conditioning, I call it sometimes, of pick yourself up and move on.
Yes.
After a while, I forgot it ever happened. He was no longer in my thoughts. Every so often I'd have a fleeting thought, but it was just not there, not constant. And it wasn't until after I started the podcast and I started to talk about that loss again that I actually started to grieve his death after all these years.
I'm so sorry for your loss. In my training, they say that the 2 most difficult losses you will experience in your lifetime is spousal loss and the loss
of a child. And the only thing I can think of that would have made his loss more difficult was the loss that people experience when they lose a child who is an adult, because they've had all those years of knowing and loving that child and watching them grow and watching them develop and mature, and then to lose them. So that must really exponentially be far more difficult. So, and my point in that was there were actually several points. First of all, grief is different for everybody.
Yes.
Sometimes, depending on situations, you will go on not even aware anymore that something like that happened. And then all of a sudden, bam, it's going to come and blindside you, and you're going to have to deal with it. Yep, those grief waves. Now, someone had named them at one point, and I can't remember doesn't matter. But it was like those little brief moments you get where you really get blindsided by that grief. And then
first?
No, they had a little acronym for it.
Oh.
And I'll have to go look it up now and everything. But there was an article written about it. It was interesting. I probably mentioned it in the podcast 95 times, and you're 97. I can't think of it. At any rate, but it is a definite issue. And, I will go through days, like I say, it's been almost 7 years, and I won't think of Tom every minute of every day. But all I have to do, and Kelly's going to smile at this one, is see a bottle of hot sauce.
Aww.
And Tom will immediately come to mind. He loves hot sauce. If I see someone in a military uniform, of course, my mind will go to Tom. He served in Vietnam and he retired Army. Even a first responder in uniform will bring back a memory of Tom. So there's many different things during the day. Tim Hortons always summons Tom back to me as well, because every day he had to have his Tim Hortons coffee.
It's all those secondary losses.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And those are things. But where they used to make me tear up, now they make me smile.
Oh, that's good.
So that also lets me know that I have progressed in my healing. Now, I want to ask you too, and maybe you said it and I missed it. When you went to the beach and stood in front of those waves, about how long had it been that your husband had been gone from you?
Oh, I don't know. I would have to think about it. I can tell you more about that. Was right after my dad died. So I buried my grief with my daughter wanting to be her rock. I did not process my grief. I just buried it, shoved it down, suppressed it.
It's what we do a lot.
And then when my mom died unexpectedly with a brain aneurysm, I had to take care of my father. Didn't even have time to mourn my mom's loss.
Right.
And then when my dad died, it all came up.
Okay.
So I can tell you that this was about 2 months after my dad's passing.
Okay.
When that happened. And it was, I didn't realize how quiet my house was. He died during my daughter's winter break, my father.
Uh-huh.
And as his caregiver, I had pushed him in the wheelchair, help him with a walker. He had an oxygen tank.
Mm-hmm.
That first morning after I dropped her off, I think it was January 10th after winter break ended, it was so quiet in my house. And that's when I realized, wow, I did not realize that his wheelchair made so much noise, how loud the oxygen tank was. That silence was so loud. I don't know how to explain it other than all of the noises that he used to bring with his care was gone. Hospice picked everything up the day that he died. So I would say it was about 2 months or so, because I stayed stuck in bed after my dad died, because all of a sudden when he died, everybody that I lost, my brother, my mother, my husband, my dad, it all came up at once. And that's what I teach my clients is if you don't feel the feels, those grief feels, if you don't process it, if you don't dig deep down and do the grief work, it's going to come up when you don't want it to come up, when you least expect it to.
Right.
And that's what happened to me it was when my dad died. I mean, if you think about it, that was my first man that I ever loved. I was a girl.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, that happens. And we often do push our grief down. We may, sometimes we push it down for a long period of time, like you did, but especially if you have children, I think there's a tendency to do that even more. I didn't have anyone else in my household. It was just Tom and I. But I did experience getting up one day thinking, oh, I've got to get ready. I've got to go to Batavia, which was about a 45-minute drive. I got to go and visit Tom. And then I realized, no, I don't. And I stood there and I thought, well, what do I do now?
Right.
I was lost.
Yes.
I was lost. So yeah, it's very difficult, and pushing it down doesn't help. I mean, that's what I did for years with Lee, and even with my father and my mother. My father died in his late 40s, and he actually was ill and couldn't give me away for my wedding. He was in the hospital that day. So those all, even though there was a loss attached to that, there were other losses. There were all these incidental losses, these collateral losses. The fact that my own father couldn't give me away for my wedding.
Right.
My brother, fortunately, stepped up in his U.S. Air Force blues and walked me down the aisle, and that was okay. And my brother and I talk about it, and we laugh about it to this day, because as he stood there with me in front of the minister, and the minister said, "Who gives this woman to be wed?" We had rehearsed it. He was supposed to say, "Her mother and I do," okay, or "Our mother and I do," whichever one he wanted. And my brother stood there that day, and when the minister said, "Who gives this woman to be wed?" his response was, "Our mother and I do, gladly." I don't think anybody else in the church could hear that.
Gladly.
Gladly, yeah. Oh, but
he was probably nervous.
Oh, well, no, I think he did it to be just my brother. We have a really good relationship at any rate. Okay. So at what point then, did you know when you saw those waves and everything, did writing a book come to you then, or was that later?
Oh, no, the book was later.
Yeah.
Oh, no, it was, I didn't know where to start. Okay. And that's why I went and found other grief counselors and was first trying to do it where it was through my health insurance. And I'll be honest with you, that stopped. I could not find any grief counselor that understood spousal loss and understood. And I almost felt berated sometimes.
Yeah.
Because, like, well, why can't you do this? And they never share. Not one person talked to me about widow's fog. Not one person at my primary care. Every time I would end up in an ER, not understanding what was happening, I could not ignore the symptoms because I thought I was having a heart attack.
Oh, yeah.
And I couldn't call 911 because I didn't want my little girl to see, is mommy going to die now?
Right.
So every time I would go to the ER, they didn't talk to me about widow's fog. They didn't talk to me about any tools or anything that I could do to help myself.
Because they don't know.
No, we live in such an uneducated grief society. And the doctors who have to care for us, they have not gone through a grief education.
Yep.
They have never been trained to have bedside manners.
Yep.
At least in my experience.
Yes.
Until the one day that I did have a sweet doctor who he just held my hand and he said, "You need to take care of yourself the way you have been placing that nurturing heart into everybody else. You now need to do it for yourself."
Absolutely.
But I didn't. I don't know when the book. I just published it a year ago.
Yeah.
And it took me over a year, almost 2 years, to write this book. So it's no, self-care was the first step I needed to do.
Good.
Because I was crippled with anxiety. Yeah. I didn't know how to get through that. So
Yeah. We talk about self-care a lot on this podcast. Almost every time I close an episode, I always remind everybody to take care of themselves and to practice self-care. And my good friend John Polo said once that self-care can be very simple. It can be simply surrounding yourself by the right people, making sure that the people who support you are on your little team and everything. And if you have toxic people that keep asking you, haven't you gotten over that yet?
I talk about this all the time. Christina, you need to move on.
Yeah.
Get over him. How do I get over him? He's the father of my child.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I also say in my group, when I talk about self-care, that rest.
Mm-hmm.
We need to listen to.
Oh, absolutely.
And sometimes we just need to rest.
Yeah.
And that's a form of self-care too.
Yeah. Yeah. And the first piece of advice I ever give anyone who says, what would you tell somebody who's dealing with grief? I just say, be patient with yourself.
Give yourself grace. Yeah.
Just be patient. Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, sadly, time goes by so fast.
We could talk forever.
I really think we could. So that just means that you're going to have to come back another time.
I would love to. It would be my honor. Thank you.
Not a problem. It'll be our honor, actually. But yes, you need to come back another time. But let's wind this down. First of all, I want to turn the microphone over to you and have you tell people more about your book, about what other services you might offer them, any classes you might have, your coaching services, whatever.
Thank you so much. Yes, I've written that book, The Positive Widow, and it's found on Amazon. But I've actually started offering to anyone that wants me to personally sign the book and write a little bit about their husband and dedicate it to their husband in his memory. I will be happy to do that.
Sweet.
That's been actually such a blessing for so many. You can reach out to me by either sending me an email to thepositivewidow@outlook.com. And I also have a website, www.thepositivewidow.com. If you are a widow, I have a free Facebook group, The Positive Widow. That's my brand, if you haven't picked up on that.
I'll be looking for it.
I also, yes, you should. And I also have a coloring book, an adult coloring book that helps with anxiety. And that's on Amazon, and that's under The Positive Widow as well. And then I also have been a keynote speaker at many grief events. And I created a program that I'm so proud of. It's called the Positive Widow Grief Relief Group Coaching Program.
Nice.
And it's a very small group. I have to keep it small because it's a very personalized grief coaching program. Mm-hmm. And I call it the Hope Seat instead of the Hot Seat. I do some teaching for about an hour, and then I have grief experts come in to do grief body movement exercises. And then I do the Hope Seat, and that's where the magic happens. And that's where the sisterhood connections happen. Nice. And I offer that throughout the year. So feel free again to email me, or you can Facebook Messenger me. You can find me anywhere on social media under The Positive Widow or Christina Napoleon.
Sounds great.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely. So Kelly, did you have anything you want to insert before I wrap it up?
I just want to say thank you, Christina, for coming on our podcast today. I learned so much from you already, and it's only been minutes. So I look forward to talking to you again, and I will be emailing you.
That's so kind. Thank you so much for saying that. It means so much to me. Thank you. It was such a pleasure to meet both of you, and I would love to come back. So
well, I think our friendship has only just begun. I think so too. Our paths are going to cross a few times here coming.
And that's the beautiful thing about what we're doing.
Absolutely.
We meet such wonderful people and our bonds and connections are so strong.
Yep. And I literally
are lifelong connections.
Yeah. I believe that. I believe that completely. So listeners, it's time once again for me to wind down and say again, thank you for taking the time out of your day to listen. Whatever activity you may have been doing in addition to listening is fine. The fact that you listen is wonderful. Listening is great. I hope you have heard something that has piqued your curiosity and that you either reach out to Christina, maybe to ask a question or ask about her services or to purchase her book. And if for some reason you are not able to afford a book, ask your library to get a copy. Ask your library. Let them know you heard this great podcast and make sure you tell them the name. And this book was talked about on it and you think it'd be a great addition.
Can I offer something free to your listeners?
Oh, sure. Go ahead.
If they want to send me an email to thepositivewidow@outlook.com, I can email them 3 free grief guides.
Wow.
Yes. So for any of your listeners, they're wonderful guides. The first one is how to survive the holidays after a loss. And then because of my finance background of 25 plus years, I also did a financial reference guide for new widows.
Oh.
And that one is the most sought after guide. And then I created a hopeful mornings and a peaceful evening practical checklist. I love checklists. I'm a checklist girl. And as widows, as caregivers, most especially, if we're entering widowhood as a caregiver, we're so exhausted. So it's little things that you can check off, like remembering to brush your teeth at night.
Oh, that's cool.
Yes. It is all centered around the words hopeful and peaceful.
Nice. Oh, I like that.
Feel free to send me an email and I'll be happy to send those free grief guides to you.
Oh, that's super. I'll have to try to remember to put that in the podcast notes as well for people that maybe didn't listen all the way to the end.
I
know sometimes that happens. I'm just all righty. So I guess I've talked enough. Now it's time to let Christina go, let Kelly go, but to say to everyone, thanks so much again for listening. Please take care of yourselves and come back again next time as we all continue to live in grief. Thank you, Christina.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening with us today. Do you have a topic that you'd like us to cover, or do you have a question from one of our episodes? Please email us at info@asiliveinGrieve.com and let us know. We hope you will find a moment to leave a review, send an email, and share with others. Join us next time as we continue to live and grieve together.